Good morning. My name's Tom Collins, Head of Software at the DVLA, and I'm joined by Dave Kirk, who works with CGI, one of our suppliers. We've got a really great relationship, and we're going to talk about how we're using AI coding assistance at the DVLA. So it's fitting, I guess, in a room with such a great scientific history to be talking about AI. If you think about the hardware and infrastructure required to do training and inference on a global scale, if you think about the code used to train and run models, it's widely believed that when we get sort of AGI, it'll take about 10,000 lines of code, which is a relatively small amount of code to do this incredible work. Or you then start thinking about machine consciousness and will we get consciousness in the machine? These are all at the cutting edge of science and built on scientific history. Really impressive stuff. But we're going to focus today on the human impact of AI. So we've been using AI coding assistance at the DVLA for 2 years. And that's been an experiment in itself. When we started, it was a new technology. And we've gone through lots of learning and really focused on what's the impact on our software engineers of bringing in AI. So that's going to be the theme today. So a little bit about me. I love the software craft. I've been working with software for 30 years. I still enjoy coding. I've spent years learning to write code, refining my technique and learning the skill. I really love using software. But I also love AI coding tools. AI is incredible. It's magic. It's powerful. It does some incredible things. The things in software that we've seen it do, the power that we're exposed to is genuinely mind-blowing what the tools can do today. I want to respect and support the software engineers at the DVLA. So we've got lots of people who've been doing the craft for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. They love the craft. They like writing code. It's a huge part of their life. And I respect that, and I want to support them. I also want to encourage innovation. I want us to adopt AI coding assistance and AI in our services. And I want us to become more efficient at writing code. Software is expensive. It takes a long time. It's a huge effort. And there's still so much software and digital services that we need to build. You'll notice there's a real tension between these two things. And that's really based around the people. The technology is brilliant. The people are brilliant. And the theme today is really going to explore when you take people who love the craft and have spent years and it's an important part of their life, and you bring in this technology that effectively is some people would say it's going to replace software engineers. I don't agree. There's a real tension between these two themes. We can't ignore them, but we need to bring in the technology with respect for the people and also encourage people to make the most of it. So what are AI coding assistants? So these are specialized AI tools for software developers. They have features like code completion, agents, or allow the use of other tools. So this is an IDE. This is the sort of software that a developer would use, an integrated development environment. These have been around for years. This is a modern IDE called VS Code. On the left, we've got the files that are available in the project. In the middle, we've got a code file, the piece of code that you're working on at that point in time. And over here on the right, we have the AI coding assistant. So in this case, it's GitHub Copilot. And 3 years ago, this didn't exist. So you'd have an IDE that didn't have this feature. Now, developers spend a huge amount of time in this panel on the right. This is our interface to the AI coding tool. And it allows us to interact with an agent, run tools, and implement code through natural language. The AI coding tools have access to many models. So if you use something like ChatGPT, you're typically using the models provided by OpenAI. In an AI coding tool, you'll have access to models from many vendors. These change frequently and have different costs and capabilities. So as an example, this is one of our internal tools. It's a UI that shows the health of our different digital products. On this page, there is a list of products. I can ask in very simple and vague natural language, I want to be able to search through this list. I've even got a spelling mistake in the prompt, which wasn't intentional. The agent doesn't really care about this. From this simple prompt, within a few minutes, the tool will be able to analyze the code base, modify the code, as you can see in red and green there, and implement the feature. And literally within a few minutes, I'm able to search through the products. And this is magical for someone who's spent their whole life learning to do this. Having an agent that can do this in mere minutes is incredible. In reality, this is a fairly trivial example, but hopefully demonstrates the power of the tools. So at DVLA, we've been using AI coding assistants for 2 years. We've got a lot of experience, and we've seen the tools develop over that time. We have around 200 users with licenses for the tools. So we recently ran a survey. We had 58 respondents out of 200, which isn't bad. So this is real data. It's not from a supplier trying to sell you AI. This is real insight into the engineers who've got significant experience with the tools. I have to go a little bit closer to read this. So how often do you use AI coding assistants? And now, out of the respondents, the vast majority are using the tools daily. We've got someone who's saying never. What's that guy doing? And this is okay. So at the DVLA, we're not expecting people to use AI coding assistants. We're not mandating people should use them. They're a tool. That may change in the future, but today we don't mandate that you must use AI. And this is okay. We respect the craft that people have got. If someone feels like they're doing a better job without AI, that's okay. What we care about most is the quality and the integrity of the systems that we make. And in that respect, our process hasn't changed. How useful do you find AI coding assistants? Overwhelmingly positive, right? Out of the respondents, it's an incredibly positive response to the usefulness of the tools. And do you enjoy your job more using AI coding assistants? So not quite as positive an answer, but it's leaning towards people who are enjoying their jobs more. So when we introduced the tools around 2 years ago, they were magic. Look at this, I can type in something vague and it'll try and do it. It didn't always work at the start. The capabilities of the tools compared to today were relatively basic, but they worked. You could type something in and it would try and do it. This was incredible. But we also had a lot of fear and skepticism, and this is okay. We had a small group of users who were already using the tools outside work, or people who were very keen to try them. But the majority of people, I don't need AI, it can't do my job. And a lot of fear. Some of it, is it going to take my job? You'll be glad to know, over around 6 months, the majority of this went away. So even the most hardened Java engineers who really cared about their code came around to use the tools. But the ideas at the start were small scale and limited. So people weren't trying to do complex things. We weren't applying engineering practice to the way we used them. And some of that was limited by the tools. Some of it was limited by our ambition and vision as engineers. And the sort of things we did at the start are fairly trivial. I've got some code. Can you write me some tests? And it would write some tests. And this was helpful. It's not particularly complicated. The engineer would review them. This is great. We were able to try and fix low priority issues. In this case, we had a database performance issue. The agent was able to look at the SQL query, the database query, and suggest an optimization. And this is useful. Not particularly grand, but very useful as an aid. We started to see some things which weren't purely technical. So some engineers, pair programming remotely, were able to screen share and use the tool to provide, to describe programming concepts, in this case, scope in JavaScript. You'd ask the agent, can you describe scope? And it wouldn't just describe it by pulling back reference from the web. It would actually look at the code you're working on and describe scope in the context of the code you're looking at. This is something that wasn't possible before AI. It's contextualizing the learning and knowledge, and this is really impressive. Fairly early on, we set up an AI coding group. So we realized this is great new technology, it's powerful, we need to do more to use it. But we also need to bring people along, and we need to share knowledge. We don't know how to use these tools. The good practice, the engineering practice, it didn't exist. We set up an AI coding working group. I run this every Friday for half an hour. It's now one of our most active communities. We have a chat every day people are posting, look at this new model, have you tried this, have you tried this technique? And this is really key to growing both support for the tools and the technology, but allowing us to learn how to use it more effectively. And there's a really nice quote, which happens to be from Dave. I was using this long before this talk and preparing this quote. It's a really nice quote that really sums up the impact AI's had. And again, I'll have to go closer. It's like being back at the start of my career, all the innovation and sharing ideas. It feels like it's been a while since we've had this in the industry. And this really genuinely sums up the excitement and the impact on software developers from AI coding. You can't underestimate the impact this has had. You've got something that's it's going to take your job, but it's actually excited engineers. We're sharing ideas, we're trying to learn the tools. We're actually looking at it in a positive way. It's not scary, it's not going to replace us. How do we engage with it? How do we share ideas and motivate each other to do more? So our maturity journey, at the start, the tools were very, very basic. If you just used it, it would do a fancy autocomplete and complete your code. You could try and ask it to do something. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's quite basic. And then around a year later, early 2025, the tools took a sort of huge leap forward. So with the introduction of agent mode, so the ability to do complex tasks, reason about them, do things in multiple steps, and call tools and MCP servers. This allowed the agents to call APIs or query files or execute other programs. And this capability in the core models and the tools around them revolutionized what we were able to do. From there, we started to see engineers instructing and configuring their tools to behave in the way they want through structured workflows and sort of configuring the agents to work in their personal style or to apply engineering practice. And from there, we've looked to how we establish AI standards and best practice within the organization to kind of, again, introduce better governance and structures and shared best practice and configuration. And it helps to look at this on a timeline. So at the bottom, we've got the models. And whilst this goes back several years, if you notice in around 2025, there's a real cluster of new models and innovation. The same is true in the AI coding tool layer. So it's not just about the models. The AI coding tools themselves are an area of innovation, huge innovation. How they invoke the models and how they provide access to tools, the interfaces for humans. And again, all the activity really happened in that 24-25 area. And the third layer then is the developer community and culture. In 24-25, we had the introduction of vibe coding or industry standards for configuring tools through things like agents.markdown. And what we saw is there's a feedback loop between these layers. So often the innovation happened at the top. People created new ideas, new ways of working. These were then fed down into the AI coding tools, which standardized them. And that fed into the models themselves, where the models were then trained to make better use of tools to support the agents. There's a real feedback loop between these three layers. And what happened around April 25, once we had these powerful models, better AI coding tools, agents, we started to see a very different use of the tools. So this example is from Chris Williams, one of our engineers, cloud engineers. We had an outage with one of our Kubernetes clusters. He wanted to use the QCLI to investigate the issue, just to give him some advice on it. What could this be? He ran his agent, and instead of providing him answers, it said, can I go and query a cluster? So we gave it credentials, and it actually went off, queried the real infrastructure, and diagnosed the problem. It didn't offer him advice. It went off and investigated the problem and told him how to fix it. And this blew his mind. He wasn't expecting this at all. Really good example. One of our other engineers wanted to work in a test-driven development process. And he did this individually. He configured his agent to write a failing test, modify the code, assert the test has passed, and then refactor the code. And he did this through customizing it with instructions. Just human natural language. These were his bespoke instructions: run the test, write the test, run the code, prove the test passes. And he's able to work in this manner through the CLI. And this is bringing real engineering practice, you're not vibe coding. This is serious engineering-led, test-driven development by an individual. We also saw an explosion in the development of internal tools. So this is more in the vibe coding area, where there's our internal tools are a low-risk area. So we're not dealing with real data and touching customers or real services. And we've seen numerous examples. It's very common now for us to quickly build a tool in half a day. So back to the survey. Do you feel more able to take on complex work with AI coding assistance? Overwhelmingly, yes. This is something we're seeing. Engineers can take on things they wouldn't have been able to do before. Does it allow you to take on work that would not have been feasible? Again, overwhelmingly, yes. So people are comfortable taking on new technologies, languages they've never used before using AI coding assistance. Brilliant. This example is one of our legacy systems. We're replatforming it. One of our engineers was able to use it to interface with printers and scanners in a language he's never used before to allow us to sort of transform off our mainframe. Brilliant. So we've seen lots of examples of individuals, right? These are brilliant examples, but they're all individuals doing it, taking it upon themselves to innovate. And for a long time, I was thinking, how do we scale this up? How do we do this at the team level? Thankfully, in CGI, we had a partner who were also thinking the same thing. We had the right level of trust, and we were able to work with CGI to explore this idea. So I'll hand over to Dave.
Thank you. Cool, yeah, so like Tom says, we wanted to see how we could make this work at a team level rather than just individuals. So we proposed an experiment. It was, that came up quicker than I thought. So an experiment, how do we actually implement this at a team level? So traditionally, we've all known this process. You've got your backlog of tickets. They go through a refinement. You take them into the sprint. Engineers pick them up. You may find an engineer is using an AI coding assistant. They may use that to help implement a ticket. Other engineers won't. Engineers will use their coding assistants in different ways, depending how they want to use it. So what we wanted to do is see, could we use AI coding assistants to consistently produce higher quality code? Could we apply it across a whole team level? And could we use it for more than just implementing code, so documenting requirements and this kind of thing? So we picked a project that we were asked to look at, which is drivers reminders processes. So, traditionally, if your driving license expired, you'd get a letter in the post saying you need to renew your driving license. 2025, we thought, let's use some email, innovation at its finest. So we have the mainframe. It generates a daily reminders file. Then there's going to be an action processor that will take that reminders file. It will call an existing DVLA utility, which for sending notifications out, and that will look at customer preferences and decide whether to send an email, an SMS, or continue to send post. And it was this action processor that we were going to use on our sort of experiment of AI coding assistants to implement. And this was greenfield, so this didn't exist before this. So we came up with this concept of product requirement prompt. So now what our process looked like was, still had our tickets in the backlog, we still went through refinement, they came into sprint, but when an engineer picked them up, Tom said they don't mandate AI coding assistant usage at DVLA. For this project, we mandated AI coding assistant usage. But what they would do is they would generate a product requirement prompt using a custom prompt. That would then be generated, it would be refined through the team, and once we were happy that PRP matched the requirements and would implement what we needed, the engineers would then pick that up and they would implement that product requirement prompt through an AI coding assistant using another implementation prompt. So it was a very structured process, everyone was using the same process, and so we were able to sort of learn the lessons through that, and everyone using the same process. This is kind of what that process looked like. So the stuff in green is the stuff that's always existed. The stuff in the sort of the orangey amber color, that is the new bits that we introduced in terms of generating the PRPs and how we would implement them. So how do we generate this? So we would have a ticket. just a normal JIRA ticket that documented the requirements. That would get fed into the AI coding assistant. It would read some standards and some instructions that were defined in the repo. That's mainly around the engineering standards for DVLA. We would then have our product requirement prompt. Naming stuff is hard. That would then generate our PRP, which looks like this. And the PRP would it's very similar to a product requirement document. The major difference being in a PRP, we would actually define exactly, so this is telling it to go off to JIRA and get the ticket. We then get the PRP. This is what it would look like. It's very similar to a PRD. The main difference being in a PRP, we actually detail very explicitly how to implement that requirement as well, not just what it is and why we're doing it. So that's the main difference. And here you can see what success criteria would be. It talks about some libraries to use and some gotchas we need to be aware of and that kind of stuff. And the developer would then implement that through their coding assistant. So at DVLA and at CGI, we have great developers. We all have our own taste and style we want to do and value maintainable code. So we were trying to implement these DVLA standards. We did this through custom instructions in the repo that would get fed into them. And again, these were all shared in the repo, so every developer had the same set of instructions. Again, trying to bring a sort of a consistent process to everything. But the LLMs also use their training data. And that kind of causes some problems because they seem to value their training data over our instructions. So even basic things like creating a skeleton Spring Boot service, 35 comments because it wasn't quite matching the DVLA standards, despite a lot of instructions. So there were some interesting things we were finding there. And here you can see one of them, DVLA liked to use annotations, and the AI agent didn't want to put the annotations in, so it took a lot of work to get it to sort of listen to that stuff. So ultimately, was the experiment a success? Well, yes, it was. The service was delivered on time, a couple of weeks early from estimation. It's gone into production. It's currently running in production, and it's sending around 30,000 reminders a day. So it's there, it's running, it's being supported by DVLA. But there were some findings around how it affected our engineers. So really high cognitive load of reviewing AI output. Not only were we asking developers to review the code that the AI coding assistants were generating, they were having to review the PRPs, they were having to review the refinement and the comments of the PRPs, they were having to review a lot of refactors and everything like that. A lot of the engineers felt like they were losing some of their creativity, implementing it by just feeding a prompt or feeding a document into a prompt and getting code wasn't overly satisfying. And we kind of found like if we use it for everything, it was a bit much. We weren't giving them anything to do. And the code would pass the validation gates, but it often, like we saw, didn't necessarily meet the standards that DVLA wanted. So some other things, don't AI everything. We kind of forced developers to use AI for everything. That doesn't work. We need to trust developers to use the tools that they've got when they should use them. Allow some technical debt to occur, even in AI. We've always allowed technical debt. It's a valid thing. That doesn't change. Providing reference code was much better than providing just instructions. And longer term, I think we're probably going to need to look at organizations having their own models that have been trained on their own style. I think that's how we're going to get the most success. The product requirement prompts, even if we didn't use AI to actually implement them, a lot of our engineers found them really useful for breaking down stories and how to implement them. And some of our junior engineers in particular found that really useful to help them understand how to go about implementing things. And the size of the stories is really important. If you give the AI too much context or try to get it to do too much in one go, it struggles, I think it's fair to say. So that was kind of our experiment and what we found. And I'll hand back to Tom so he can talk a little bit about what he sees for the future.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to whiz through this bit because we're just about at time. So thank you, Dave. It was really interesting to do the experiment, and now we're looking at what does the future look like. Back to this diagram, you notice the blank bit on the right. What happened at the end of last year and the start of this year is the models crossed the threshold where human coding is over. Right? They've crossed the threshold where it's indisputable now that how powerful they are, and you get quotes like this: "Human coding is over," basically. So our survey, do you like the idea of a future where we use natural language? And this is surprisingly positive, right? People aren't saying no. Do you think you've lost coding skill? People are starting to think maybe they are, but it's not completely terrible, right? So in DVLA, this is something we openly talk about. We're not hiding away from it. I don't think software engineering is going to go away, but people need to change. And there is a threat, and people who don't adapt and take it positively, they're possibly going to get left behind. Do you worry about the future? A lot of people do worry about the future, which is natural. And I think what we see in software is going to happen in other industries. The tools have been highly optimized for software engineering. This will happen to other industries in the future, and people need to approach it positively and adapt. I'm not going to read through all these because we're out of time, but these are the concerns that we're trying to balance. It's the human impact versus the possibilities and innovation. I'm going to leave with this slide because I think this encapsulates really what's going to happen in our industry and other industries where people need to share ideas. We need to work with the tools and AI. Don't be afraid of them, but you're going to have to change and look at it in a positive way. Cool. We're all done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.